it's almost like some of the glasses that you guys did, the upright and resting glasses, where the way I'm going to start out with this is I'm going to start with ellipses. So if we evaluate this thing, and I'll go back to what we said early in the semester. If you get the convergence right and you get the proportion right, perspective is pretty easy. But I want you to look at the overall proportion. This is the width of the base, which is just a simple little circle. It gets fatter, and that's about 2/3, almost 2/3 of the way up. It's about its fattest. Notice that it gets a little bit fatter over here as it heads towards the spout. And then it comes back into almost the same width at the top. So if you look at this curve out to the left, we're ultimately going to use that curve to help generate our drawing. And then look at the handle, and the way that the handle, the things that I'm looking at on that handle are the way that handle, the angle with which it comes out, not relative to the body necessarily, but relative to horizontal. And then how it comes up, I'm looking at this angle, it's on a slight curve, and then there's essentially a large radius, and then it comes down, and it doesn't come down perpendicular to the ground, it comes down at a little bit of an angle. And then I'm looking at this proportion, I'm looking at the spout and the angle of the spout. So those are the things that I'm basically looking at as I evaluate this and I try and draw it. So when I start something out, we're going to start this perspective out with ellipses. So I'm going to draw the bottom. Let me go a little darker. I'm going to draw the bottom. I put in a minor axis. I'm going to draw the bottom ellipse. And what this bottom ellipse is telling me is how far down am I looking on this object, right? I'm going to use one of the first rules we talked about with ellipses, and that is as I approach the horizon line, my ellipses get what? Thinner. Yeah. Now I need to look at this proportion. So I've established what this is. If I look at from here up to there and thinking about where the center of the ellipses are, that's almost the same distance. It's a little bit less tall, but basically I'm going to take the width of this and translate it to here, and this is going to be the center of that second ellipse. And I'm going to make it a thinner degree. Now let's look at the proportion there. So from here out to here, it's getting pretty wide. So I haven't gone wide enough. But I'm just drawing that widest part. Again, just like the upright glasses. And then I need to look at the next proportion, which is from that widest point up to the lid. And that's a pretty small proportion. It's only about like this. And I'm going to go a little bit thinner. And I'm looking at that width relative to the bottom width, which again, they're about the same. My concentration is my ellipse bisected by that minor axis? I hope so. And that these are getting a little bit thinner as they move up. All right. What I need to do now is I haven't really established, I've established with the rate of how quickly my ellipses go from wide to thin, I have established the rate of convergence, or essentially how close I am to this object, but I have not established where the vanishing points are. And with this teapot, I actually want to draw it with the handle. We're going to draw the handle to the left side, but I'm going to have the handle kind of facing me and the spout facing away. And what I want to do is I want to figure out, well, how much of that spout do I see? And by establishing this next line, I'm going to basically begin to set up how much of that spout I'm going to see. So that line is going to the right vanishing point. I have now established my perspective. And so over here, I can sketch in a chord. That's going to the left vanishing point. And ultimately, I'll have some convergence. I can continue to draw in some of those lines, but let's go ahead and draw in those lines to help us in the future as we begin to establish the rest of the details of this object. You know what? Since it's right in line with all those ellipses, I'm going to draw the handle on. So one of the interesting things, if this is the center of this top ellipse, right there, it's the center of this line, then the next, I'm going to have a little bit of a curve, so I need to step that up, and then I'd have this is maybe where the bottom of the small handle is. I'm looking at that proportion, and then it gets a little bit wider as it moves up. Well, now what I need to do is I need to kind of look at this profile that wraps around, that revolves around this object. This is coming off of that profile, and the handle's coming off of that profile. One of the things that we'll see people do when they draw this is not a good practice. When they draw like something like this that has a handle in perspective and it's a cylinder, they'll draw their ellipse, and then they'll draw the handle just right off to the side. And that's ultimately one-point perspective. That's not a good practice. We want to draw that handle coming off at an angle, and it's actually going to come off at this angle that I've already established right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw this profile from here up through here where it goes tangent to vertical, on around to where it meets this. And that's almost starts out tangent to horizontal. I'm going to come around, tangent to vertical right in here. And then it's got to come down to this point. I made it a little bulged up a little bit too much right there. I have those same 3 points on the opposite side, so I want to take the character of that curve and carry it over to the other side. Now this curve isn't actually going to be on my object because the spout is over here. That looks like it's bulging out a little too much too. Well, let's go ahead and finish this. Notice that it's got to come back in up here. It's going to accelerate around so that it can get back down to, again, being somewhat tangent to horizontal at that point. I can almost, at this point, it looks like an apple, right? Kind of like a squatty apple. At this point, I can take the character of that curve and imagine that curve being revolved around. And I'm going to lightly sketch in what the overall silhouette of my object would be, which it's actually going to extend a little bit above where I drew where the top lid comes in. It's actually going to extend up. See how this is proud of that surface? It's going to extend up above that. It's going to hit that curve that I drew tangent, just like in one of those exercises we did on Monday. And it's going to roll around like this. And I'm going to do that same thing on the other side. So it's coming up proud of that surface. And it's rolling around. And now I've got a silhouette of my object. So that's the easy part. I think the character of this does come up a little bit more right in there. It should look symmetrical. The only thing I'm drawing right now is that teapot without the handle and without the spout. So if we look at the spout and the handle, this spout actually comes out side of what we've drawn so far. Just kind of this area right in here. And I'm looking at that silhouette, and just like we did with the mustaches, I want to take this curvature, this curve, this S curve right here, and this angle that comes back, and this curve right here, and I want to put it in perspective on this section line that I drew in here. And so starting just below that area where it gets proud, it continues to come out a little bit more. It's angling up, and then it comes out a little bit right there. Y'all see what I'm drawing? I'm drawing this as if it's in perspective. So it's coming up, angles back out, then there's an angle, but I'm going to wait on that angle because I want to draw in the top. And so if we look at this, this is kind of, it doesn't accelerate as much. See how this curve, on this side it accelerates really quickly there. That curve's a little bit smooth, and then it takes on and it changes direction and comes back up like this. So I'm going to not go down as quickly and then come back up. And that probably takes place a little bit earlier than that. And I'm going to draw in the angle. And what I'm trying to draw in, if this is a vertical angle out here, that looks like it's about a 45. So I'm going to try and estimate what a 45-degree angle would look like in perspective out there. And that's not what we would see, that's just the angle that that thing falls on. What will we see out here? We'll see like just a super thin ellipse. And we'll really only see the top of it. And then what happens here is that this rolls over. It's an organic shape. Just like we saw part of the silhouette of this object back here is proud of this, and that center line, this is the section line running through the center as if we're cutting it. That same thing will happen here to where this, whoops, that just begins to roll in over there. So we really don't see much of it. And it looks like, Rusty, does it look like that needs to open up a little bit to you?
Yeah, yeah.
From my angle? Okay. I'll give you guys just a minute to catch up. So just again to reiterate the process, look at how much construction I put in there. I think this really goes a little bit more like that. And I don't even, that part of my drawing I'll never see, right? We'll never see that part of this drawing, but it just helped me with the construction, and I wouldn't know where to put this if I didn't put that in there. I wouldn't know my proportions. It'd be difficult to see some of those details. All right, now comes a pretty challenging part, and that's this handle. Do you guys need a minute to catch up? Okay, so the first thing I'm going to look at, I'm going to try and draw, and I mentioned this a little bit to many of you when we were drawing a tube, the tubing for the handlebars. The way I like to draw this is I like to draw as if there's a wire running through the very center of that handle. And the shape of that handle is it's almost an ellipse itself. So it's curved a little bit on the top. I guess it is an ellipse. It may not be a perfect ellipse, but essentially it's shaped like this. And so what I want to do is imagine a wire that's just right in the middle of that. That wire is going to hit this section line that I drew right here, there and there, so that'll help me. So what I'm trying to imagine is, along this curve, where does this start? And what's that angle? So, to me it looks like it's somewhere about right here. Is where that's going to start. Along that section line, where does it end? Well, it's going to end, say, about right here. Tell you what, it's easier to visualize this angle than it is this one to me, so I'm going to go ahead and sketch in just that angle very lightly, and then I'm going to sketch in, and I like to start with like simple angles, and then I'll add like straight lines, and then sometimes I'll just add the curvature afterwards, because I want to evaluate the proportion of all this. Here's the handle coming up, and then there's a different angle coming back, and ultimately this is a giant ellipse. This is a giant ellipse. that will connect those. Now, let me look at the proportions. My ellipse doesn't seem to be big enough. I don't think my angle's right, and that'll change the ellipse. I need to add a curve in. And then this is going to come down and hit right here. This is coming around. There's still a little bit of a curve as this comes around. So I feel, what do you think, Rusty? Is that big enough? I don't think that's big enough. I'm going to change my proportion. This is that angle. Yeah, I'm thinking about this as just the center line. This is that wire running through the very center of that object, because now that I feel way more confident in the proportion of that. And remember, I've got foreshortening, so that handle in perspective should actually appear to be larger than we will perceive it, I guess. We'll see it a little bit larger than everything else. So now, what I'm looking at now, I've got the center of this handle in. What I want to do now is pay attention to my vanishing lines that are going towards the left vanishing point. And at key points all along this handle and that wire, I'm going to draw a line that I feel like is the thickness. Like right down here, I'm drawing this line that feels like it's the thickness or the width. This width of that handle. This width of that handle, which is consistent all the way up. And that's just giving me the width. So up here, I'm going to draw a line that I feel like is the width along that vanishing line. I'm looking for this point, I'm looking for that point. Right here where that starts, I'm going to draw a line again, making sure that it's converging correctly. I'm looking at that width and this width. And again, with foreshortening, that width should get, as it comes this way, should get maybe a little bit larger. I'm not overly concerned about that. Okay, so let's do one in the center of this radius. Here's my convergence. Here's that convergence. There's my width. Start and stop there and there. Does everybody understand what I'm talking about with that width? I'm just carrying that width all around, and that's going to give me points to plot and walk around this thing. Let's do the same thing here. I've got a vanishing line right there. This is kind of easy. Let's go up to here. This is where this gets somewhat difficult. There's my width. Maybe one more, just the end of that fillet. And then one last one where this is going to meet. Let me just zoom in because I want to show you the points that I plotted, right? So I'm taking this convergence going this way. And I'm essentially taking what is about a 1-inch length of line and putting the center of that line on the original thing in these different places, and it's basically creating a ribbon, right? I feel pretty good. I can start back here and sketch in. Well, let me do one other thing while I've got it zoomed in, because this is kind of important. It's a good way to think about it. I'm not going to use this, and I'm not going to draw a whole bunch of sections in here, but ultimately all along this I've got that as a section view. So it's just like the tubular handle for a bicycle, but instead of being tubular, it's real thin.
Those ellipses are running perpendicular to the contact point at the center of that line.
Yeah, so I'll see very little of that one, and they'll get a little wider down here. I guess I am drawing that in every location. Down here, it actually widens up. So one of the interesting details, if we look at this, where this handle hits the teapot, it's going to get wider, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. But I'm thinking about it being the same size so that way I can add something later. So at each of these points, yeah, Rusty, that section is perpendicular. Here, it changes direction a little bit. And here, it's meeting that. So I can draw in the back. All I'm doing, this is like the exercise that we did when we constructed sections. I'm looking at the next curve. I'm coming through and hitting this tangent. When I think about how it needs to continue to curve around to get to this one. Here it's got to come down, and really seeing just the arc of the section right there as it disappears and changes direction. I can do the same thing on the inside, but remember how we saw the tubular frame and we see air behind it, but then the edge kind of blends into the surface? We want to think about that right there. We're going to think about it in a couple of places. This is coming up. Oh, I may have gone a little dark a little too soon. Coming up, and the same thing happens really quickly right here. I'm not going to darken in the area as it comes and meets this, because ultimately it's going to open up. I guess I can even draw that opening up and beginning to maybe, we'll draw where that kind of hits. So then on the back side, right in here, it's coming from here and going down, a little bit tighter. It's coming from here and going down. So we'll see just the inside of that, and it again gets wider as it comes in to ultimately meets the main body of that surface somewhere about right there. And we're going to do the same thing. It'll meet this on a much larger ellipse, and so we'll really only see that right in here. But just like the contour lines that help the viewer see what's happening, we never see that edge. But just by drawing that in, I've got a better idea of what's happening. I can understand. I could even draw in a contour line that came up through here. We can do the same thing here. But basically, all I'm trying to do is draw this handle and draw it accurately. So let me do that silhouette. I'm thinking about the next place it needs to hit, the next point of tangency, and then right in here, it's following, at one point it's just going to follow the contour. Right at that edge, it's following that contour. Okay, so down here, we'll just see it begin to open up a little bit, and then maybe draw this as it's hinting at rolling around that corner, that edge. Right here, I need to go, I'm thinking about, let's see, this has to come up. This is awkward. This has to come up and hit right here. So I've actually terminated that a little bit early. This needs to come on down. And it's interesting that this is just almost, I didn't draw that down far enough. Oh, that just messed up. That just messed up my drawing. I'll fix it. That needs to come on down. See how it needs to come down and hit this section? And then this would come in, but it's going to open up. Maybe open that up. We'll make it come in and hit a little bit larger. So the last thing we want to do on this is this top. And there's just the slightest little curvature in. And it comes back out. Try to repeat that on the other side. That minor axis, that center line, helps me mirror this. And I'll darken in. I'm going to show that as two fillets, two lines running around. I could even show some of this as another ellipse. Oh, there is one last thing I want to show you, and then we'll let you go to lunch. So right around here, and this is another way that these contour lines can really help us. So right around the lid, I'm actually going to put one more section line that's coming in the other direction. Whoops. So it's coming in like this. It's going to look very similar to the last one. Let's see. Needs to come out a little bit further. Coming up, rolling around, and then this is what I want you to see. So I'm just drawing that section line for the body of this on this side. It's coming around, and then right here I can take that section line and just begin to drop it. And then on the inside of that handle, just that little detail right there will tell my viewer a lot more about what's happening with that lid than what I had drawn in just a moment ago. Can everybody see that? Just that little detail. I can add that detail right here, and in fact it's going to be a little bit proud of that original line that I used to establish my perspective. Put that same detail in right there. That's helping my viewer. I could even carry it around to this back side. And then all I have to do is just kind of darken in my object lines. Are there any questions? Are y'all ready to go to lunch? Did I do that in 9 minutes? Nope, 13. Rusty, you got any questions?
This is not necessarily related to the sketch itself, but why would it open? Why would this become wider here, where it makes contact here and here? What's the reason for that? Strength. Good. Yeah. Anytime you have a sharp crease, I think I may have mentioned this before. I'll mention it probably to you 100 more times between now and when you graduate. Anytime you have two things coming together that create a corner, that corner is a point of weakness. That's the weakest link, basically. And it has a high likelihood of a crack starting there and propagating from there. So anytime you have multiple pieces coming together, you'll represent it in your sketches with at least a minimum amount of fillet or radius. And then it'll be done, because it's done in real life, with a fillet. And the larger that fillet is, the stronger that connection between those two parts will be. So if you're designing something that's manufactured in a way where there's two I guess even steel tubes coming together, that weld will will create that radius. If you're bending something, if you have plastic part that you're making, if you have pottery or ceramics like this, you want to represent it in your sketches and your communication with that type of fillet on it to, again, add reality, because in reality it's needed to add strength. And one more thing that Jared, this little part coming around here, you early on when you're doing this, you're thinking, why does it do that? Why is it happening? What's happening is it's really representing the thickness of this side. So if you were to connect, that would really technically, if you want to shade it in all the way, you wouldn't do it with a line necessarily, but you could shade it in. And you're seeing that top side versus the thickness there, and that line wrapping around is what's kind of giving you that information. And it would also happen on this top side here. That thickness would kind of wrap back to the upper side to give you an understanding, and that one really touch down here and come up from that bottom side to give you that thickness.
This feels a little awkward to me. Just right there. I think maybe I'll fix it.
Coming up higher, yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Jared.
Nailed it.